had built his empire on silence. The kind of silence that came with power, with money so vast it could buy anything except the one thing he truly wanted. At 42, he owned 17 companies across 4 continents, employed over 50,000 people, and had a net worth that fluctuated by millions depending on market moods. Yet as he sat in his penthouse office on the 47th floor of the tower in downtown Seattle, watching the city lights twinkle like fallen stars, he felt more isolated than ever. The building beneath him hummed with activity even at this late hour. Security guards patrolled the marble lobbies, cleaning crews worked through the night, and in the lower floors, his international teams coordinated with offices in Tokyo and London. But up here in his glass-walled sanctuary existed in a bubble of controlled temperature, filtered air, and absolute quiet. He had designed it this way. After growing up in a cramped apartment above his parents' restaurant in Chinatown, where the sounds of sizzling woks and shouting customers never stopped, he had sworn to create a life of peace. Success meant silence. Wealth meant walls thick enough to keep the world out. Loosened his Italian silk tie and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the streets pulsed with late-night energy. Food trucks served steaming noodles to construction workers heading home from graveyard shifts. Young couples hurried along sidewalks, probably heading to dinner dates they would remember for years. Office workers caught late buses, tired but talking on phones to family members who cared about their day. He pressed his palm against the cool glass and tried to remember the last time someone had asked him about his day with genuine interest. His assistant managed his schedule with military precision, but their conversations never ventured beyond business. His board members respected his decisions, but feared his moods. The women he occasionally dated seemed more interested in being photographed with him than actually talking to him. 3 months ago, he had attended a charity gala where a journalist asked him what made him happy. The question caught him so off guard that he had stammered something about quarterly earnings before excusing himself to the bathroom. Standing there in the marble-lined restroom of the Four Seasons, staring at his reflection in the gold-framed mirror, he realized he could not remember the last time he had felt genuine happiness. Walked back to his desk, where 3 computer monitors displayed stock prices from markets around the world. His latest acquisition, a renewable energy company in Denmark, was performing better than projected. The numbers should have pleased him. Instead, they felt like just another line item in an endless spreadsheet of success that never seemed to satisfy. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mister, your car is waiting downstairs," his voice announced. Even at 11 p.m., she remained professional and efficient. He wondered if she ever relaxed, if she ever laughed until her sides hurt or danced to music only she could hear. "Thank you, you can head home. I'll be down in a few minutes." "Sir, your morning meeting with the Singapore investors has been moved to 9 a.m. I've sent the updated presentation to your tablet." "Understood, good night." "Good night, mister." Gathered his briefcase and headed toward the private elevator that would take him to the underground garage where his driver waited with the... The elevator descended smoothly, passing floor after floor of offices where his employees had spent their days building his wealth. He owned their time, their skills, their loyalty bought with generous salaries and comprehensive benefits, but he could not buy their genuine affection or friendship. The elevator stopped at the ground floor, and through the glass walls, he could see the security guard at the front desk reading a paperback novel. The man looked up and nodded respectfully as passed. His name tag read William Torres, but had never spoken to him beyond basic greetings. For all he knew, William had worked here for years, had a family, dreams, problems that kept him awake at night. In the garage, his driver James stood beside the professional as always. "Good evening, Mr. Home." "Yes, thank you." The drive through downtown Seattle to his mansion in the Highlands took 25 minutes. Sat in the back seat, watching the city transform from business district to residential neighborhoods. Apartment buildings gave way to single-family homes with warm lights in windows and cars parked in driveways. He imagined families inside, sharing dinner stories and helping children with homework. His own mansion sat on 3 acres overlooking Sound. The Georgian-style house had 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a library that rivaled most universities, and a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes. It had been featured in Architectural Digest and House Beautiful. Visitors always commented on its elegant beauty and perfect proportions. What they did not comment on was how empty it felt. James pulled into the circular driveway and thanked him before walking up the stone steps to his front door. The entry hall, with its crystal chandelier and imported marble floors, welcomed him with the same sterile perfection it offered every night. His housekeeper, Mrs., had left his dinner warming in the kitchen and had arranged tomorrow's clothes in his bedroom according to his weather app and calendar schedule. Ate alone at the dining room table that could seat 14 people. The meal was expertly prepared, perfectly seasoned, and completely joyless. He tried to read industry reports on his tablet, but found his mind wandering to the security guard's novel. What story could be so compelling that someone would read it during work hours? When had he last read anything purely for pleasure? After dinner, he climbed the curved staircase to his bedroom. The master suite took up the entire east wing of the house, with a sitting area, fireplace, and balcony overlooking the water. The bed was king-sized with Egyptian cotton sheets and a view of the Sound that real estate agents called priceless. Changed into silk pajamas and lay down, but sleep would not come. The house was too quiet. In his childhood apartment, there had always been sounds. His parents talking in rapid Mandarin, the television playing Chinese dramas, neighborhood kids playing in the alley. The silence here felt oppressive, like a weight pressing down on his chest. He got up and walked to the balcony. The October night was crisp, and fog was rolling in from the Sound. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear a freight train crossing the bridge, its horn echoing across the water. The sound was lonely but somehow comforting, proof that the world continued to move and breathe beyond his perfectly controlled environment. Thought about his parents, who had sacrificed everything to immigrate from Taiwan when he was 8 years old. His father had worked 18-hour days in the restaurant while studying English at night. His mother had cleaned office buildings before dawn so she could help in the restaurant during lunch rush. They had pushed him to excel in school, to earn scholarships, to build a life they could never have imagined for themselves. He had exceeded their wildest dreams, but somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with the values they had tried to instill. They had worked hard not just for money, but for family, for community, for the hope that their son would find happiness in America. Instead, he had built walls around himself so high that even their love could not penetrate them anymore. His parents still lived in Chinatown, though he had offered many times to buy them a house in a better neighborhood. They preferred their small apartment above the restaurant, where they knew their neighbors and could walk to the market where vendors greeted them by name. When he visited, which was rarely, they filled the table with his favorite dishes and asked gentle questions about his life that he deflected with talk of business achievements. The last time he had seen them, his mother had held his hand and said in careful English, "Money is good, but lonely heart is heavy burden." He had promised to visit more often, to call every week, but promises were easy to make and harder to keep when your life moved at the speed of international markets. Standing on the balcony, realized that his mother was right. His heart felt heavy, weighted down by success that meant nothing when there was no one to share it with. He had everything he had thought he wanted, but he had forgotten to want the things that actually mattered. A movement in the garden below caught his attention. Someone was walking along the path that led from the main house to the small cottage where his groundskeeper lived. Rarely saw groundskeeper, though the evidence of his work was everywhere. The gardens were immaculate, the lawn perfectly maintained, the seasonal flowers expertly chosen and tended. The figure moved through the moonlight with purpose, not like someone sneaking around, but like someone who belonged there. Realized he did not even know the groundskeeper's name, though the man had worked on his property for over 2 years. Another person whose life intersected with his daily but remained completely unknown. Tomorrow, he decided, he would make an effort to learn more about the people around him. He would ask about her family, thank William for his dedication, inquire about James's life outside of driving. It was a small step, but perhaps the beginning of building connections that went beyond professional courtesy. The fog continued to roll in and could no longer see the water clearly. He went back inside and climbed into his enormous bed, pulling the covers up to his chin like a child seeking comfort. For the first time in months, he did not check his phone for overnight market updates or scan through emails from his international offices. Instead, he lay in the dark and listened to the old house settling around him. Somewhere, a grandfather clock chimed midnight. The furnace hummed quietly, maintaining the perfect temperature. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling leaves on trees whose names he did not know but whose beauty he had paid handsomely to preserve. As sleep finally approached, found himself thinking about the security guard's book, about his parents' small apartment full of love, about the groundskeeper who moved through his garden like a caretaker of something precious. These were people who understood something he had forgotten in his pursuit of success. They knew how to find meaning in simple moments, how to create connection in a world that often felt designed to keep people apart. His last conscious thought was a promise to himself that tomorrow would be different. He would start paying attention to the human lives that surrounded him, would try to remember that beneath all the wealth and achievement, he was just a man who needed the same things everyone else did: purpose, connection, and the knowledge that his life mattered to someone besides himself. The fog enveloped the house completely, creating a cocoon of white silence that seemed to promise new possibilities when morning came. In the cottage below, a light stayed on long past midnight, suggesting that someone else was also awake, perhaps reading, perhaps thinking, perhaps dreaming of futures that had nothing to woke before dawn, not to an alarm, but to unfamiliar sounds drifting through his bedroom windows. Soft voices carried on the morning air, accompanied by the gentle clatter of tools and what sounded like quiet laughter. He lay still for a moment, disoriented by the intrusion of human activity into his usually pristine silence. Curiosity overrode his irritation as he slipped out of bed and moved to the window. Below in his garden, he could see figures moving in the early light. His groundskeeper was there, along with what appeared to be a young woman and a small child. They were working together, the woman kneeling beside a flower bed while the child handed her tools from a small bucket. Had never seen them before. In all his months of living in this house, the garden had simply maintained itself, or so it seemed. He had written checks to a landscaping company and assumed that explained the immaculate grounds. The idea that actual people, a family, were responsible for the beauty he enjoyed every day had never occurred to him. He watched as the groundskeeper, a man who appeared to be in his 50s with graying hair and weathered hands, showed the child how to plant bulbs. The little girl, who could not have been more than 6 years old, listened intently before carefully placing each bulb in the soil. The woman, presumably her mother, worked nearby, her movements efficient and practiced. The scene struck as oddly intimate. Here was a family working together in his garden, sharing quiet conversation and teaching moments, while he observed from above like a king in his castle. The disconnect between their easy familiarity and his isolation felt sharper than ever. He showered and dressed quickly, foregoing his usual morning routine of checking international markets and reading financial reports. Instead, he found himself drawn to the kitchen, where Mrs. was preparing his breakfast. "Good morning, mister," she said without looking up from the stove. "Your eggs will be ready in 2 minutes." "Mrs.," he began, then stopped. In 3 years, their conversations had never extended beyond meal planning and household logistics. "The people in the garden this morning, do you know who they are?" She looked up, surprised by the question. "The groundskeeper, you mean? That's Morale's, very good man. His daughter helps him sometimes, and she brings her little girl, Sophia. They live in the cottage." "They live here, on the property." Mrs. set down her spatula and turned to face him fully. "Yes, sir. For about 2 years now. Mr. arranged it before you moved in," was the property manager who had handled the purchase of the house. "Takes care of the gardens and the little maintenance things, cleans the cottage and helps with the heavier garden work. The child, she's very sweet, quiet." Felt a strange mix of embarrassment and fascination. These people had been living on his property, caring for his home, creating the beautiful environment he enjoyed, and he had been completely unaware of their existence as human beings rather than simply a service he purchased. Are they happy here?" The question sounded strange coming from his own mouth. Mrs. studied his face carefully. "They seem to be, loves the work, is studying online, taking business classes. She wants to start her own cleaning service someday. The little girl, Sophia, she's smart as anything, always asking questions about the plants and the birds." "What happened to her father, husband, I mean?" "He died in Afghanistan, military, was barely 20 when it happened." Mrs.'s voice softened. "Is her father-in-law, but he treats her like his own daughter. They take care of each other." Felt something shift inside his chest, an unfamiliar tightness. Here was a family that had experienced real loss, real hardship, yet they had found a way to build a life together based on mutual care and support. Meanwhile, he had everything money could buy but could not remember the last time someone had depended on him for anything beyond a paycheck. "I think I'd like to meet them," he said quietly. Mrs. looked genuinely surprised. "Of course, sir. I could introduce you this afternoon when you get home from work. Actually, said, making a decision that felt both impulsive and necessary, I think I'll go out there now. He left his breakfast untouched and walked through the French doors that led from the kitchen to the garden. The October morning was crisp, with dew still clinging to the perfectly maintained lawn. He could smell the rich earth and the last of the autumn roses, scents he had enjoyed from his windows but never experienced directly. As he approached the area where the family was working, the conversation stopped. Straightened up, clearly uncertain about this unexpected encounter with the homeowner he had probably only seen from a distance, gathered the little girl closer to her side. "Good morning," said, suddenly aware that he had no idea how to begin this conversation. I wanted to thank you for the beautiful work you do here." His weathered face broke into a cautious smile. "Thank you, sir. It's good to meet you. I am Morales. This is my daughter-in-law, and this is Sophia." The little girl stared up with enormous dark eyes. She was small for her age, with her hair pulled back in neat braids and dirt on her knees from gardening. "Hello," said, crouching down to her level. "What are you planting?" Sophia looked to her mother for permission before answering. "Tulips," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Abuelo says they will be beautiful in the spring." "Abuelo means grandfather," explained, her voice carrying a slight accent. "He's teaching her about the seasons, how things grow." Nodded, struck by the simple wisdom of teaching a child about patience and hope by planting flowers that would not bloom for months. "What's your favorite flower?" Sophia considered this seriously. "I like the ones that smell good and the ones that butterflies like." "Sophia knows all the butterflies," said proudly. "She can tell you which flowers they visit, what time of day they come." Really, found himself genuinely interested. "I see butterflies from my office window sometimes, but I never paid attention to what they were doing." "They're eating," Sophia said, warming up slightly. "The butterflies eat nectar from flowers. Abuelo showed me. Some butterflies only eat from one kind of flower. They're very particular." Smiled at her daughter's use of the word particular, clearly something she had learned from adult conversations. "Sophia reads books about butterflies and insects. She wants to be a scientist someday." Felt another unfamiliar tightness in his chest. This child, who lived in a cottage on his property, who helped her grandfather plant flowers before dawn, already had dreams and aspirations that stretched far beyond her current circumstances. She reminded him of himself at that age, eager to learn and full of questions about the world. "What's your favorite book?" he asked Sophia. She looked at who nodded encouragingly. "It's called The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Mama reads it to me every night, but I can read some words myself now." "That's a good book," said, remembering his own mother reading to him in Mandarin, then later struggling through English picture books to help him learn the language. "Do you like other books too?" Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "Mama takes me to the library every Tuesday. I get 3 books each time. Miss Jennifer helps me find new ones." The image of taking her daughter to the public library every week, fostering her love of learning despite their limited circumstances, moved more than he expected. Here was a mother investing in her child's future not with money, but with time, attention, and consistency. "I have a library," said impulsively. "In the house, would you like to see it sometime?" Sophia's eyes widened, but she looked uncertain, stepped forward slightly protectively. "That's very kind of you, mister, but we don't want to impose." Realized he had made them uncomfortable. These people worked for him, lived on his property by his permission. His invitation, however well-intentioned, carried implications of obligation that he had not considered. "Please," he said carefully, "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, I just thought. I have thousands of books and I don't read most of them. Some of them are children's books from when the house was staged for sale. They're just sitting there." And exchanged a look that contained a conversation could not interpret. Finally spoke. "That's very generous, maybe sometime." An awkward silence settled over the group. Realized he had no experience with casual conversation, with the delicate social dance of building friendship rather than conducting business. Every interaction in his professional life had clear objectives and defined outcomes. This was uncharted territory. "I should let you get back to work," he said finally. "Thank you for taking such good care of everything here. The garden is beautiful." As he turned to go, Sophia's small voice stopped him. "Mister, do you like butterflies?" He turned back to find her looking at him with genuine curiosity. I think so. I've never really thought about it. There's a monarch butterfly that comes to the purple flowers by your window every morning. She has a tear in her wing, so I can tell it's the same one. She's very brave. Felt something catch in his throat. A child had been watching the same view he saw from his office, but where he had seen only a brief flutter of orange and black, she had seen an individual creature with a story, with courage. I'll watch for her, he promised. Sophia smiled for the first time since their conversation began. She comes when the sun hits the flowers just right, around 9 o'clock. Nodded solemnly, as if this information was as important as any business intelligence he had ever received. I'll make sure to look. He walked back to the house feeling oddly lighter, as if the brief conversation had shifted something fundamental in his worldview. Mrs. was waiting in the kitchen with a fresh plate of eggs and coffee. How was that? She asked gently. Surprising, said honestly. I had no idea they were so. They're people. I mean, of course they're people, but I never thought about their lives, their hopes. Mrs. sat down across from him, something she had never done before. Is a good mother, is a good man. They've had hard times, but they don't complain. They just work hard and take care of each other. Mrs. said slowly, how long have you worked for me? 3 years next month. In all that time, I've never asked you about your life, your family. That seems wrong. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her usually serious face. You ask now if you want to know. I do want to know. So she told him. About her husband who worked construction, about their 2 sons in college, about the granddaughter who was learning to speak Spanish so she could talk to her abuela, about the community garden where she grew vegetables to share with neighbors, about the church where she taught Sunday school to children whose parents worked multiple jobs. Listened, really listened, and realized that this woman who had been managing his household with quiet efficiency was actually a pillar of her community, someone whose life was rich with relationships and purpose beyond her job in his sterile mansion. I'm sorry, he said when she finished. I should have asked before. You ask now, she repeated gently. That's what matters. As finally ate his breakfast, he found himself thinking about the butterfly with the torn wing, about Sophia's dream of becoming a scientist, about its determination to build a better life for her daughter despite losing her husband so young. These were people who understood something he had forgotten, that life was not about accumulating wealth or achieving status, but about caring for each other, about noticing the small miracles that happened every day. The morning light streaming through his kitchen windows seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility and warmth. For the first time in years, was eager to see what the rest of the day would bring, not because of meetings or deals or financial opportunities, but because he was beginning to remember what it felt like to be genuinely interested in the world around him. His phone buzzed with notifications from markets in Asia, emails from executives the next morning, found himself standing at his office window at exactly 9 o'clock, watching for the monarch butterfly with the torn wing. For 20 minutes, he scanned the purple flowers below, feeling slightly foolish but unable to pull himself away. When the butterfly finally appeared, floating down to land delicately on the blooms, he felt an unexpected surge of joy. Sophia was right. The tear in the left wing was clearly visible, a small imperfection that made the creature unique, recognizable. As watched her feed, he wondered about her story. How had she been injured? How far had she traveled? What invisible forces guided her to the same flowers each morning? Mr. S.'s voice from the doorway interrupted his thoughts. The Singapore investors are here for your 9:30 meeting. Turned away from the window reluctantly. Send them in, and could you hold all my calls for an hour? I want to give them my full attention. The meeting proceeded as most meetings did, with presentations, projections, and carefully negotiated terms for a joint venture worth $30 million, but found his mind wandering to Sophia's explanation of butterfly behavior, to the patience required to watch for subtle movements, to the joy of recognizing a small creature's daily ritual. When the investors left, pleased with their agreement, walked back to the window. The butterfly was gone, but he felt oddly satisfied knowing he had witnessed her morning routine. He made a mental note to ask Sophia what she knew about monarch migration patterns. Over the next week, began incorporating small changes into his routine. He started arriving home earlier, often finding and his family working in the garden. He would stop to chat, initially awkward but gradually more comfortable with conversations that had no agenda beyond human connection. He learned that had emigrated from Mexico 30 years ago, working his way from agricultural fields to commercial landscaping before discovering a gift for creating beauty in private gardens. Had met his son, Roberto, in community college, where they both studied business. Roberto had enlisted in the army after graduation, planning to use his military benefits to help his new wife start the cleaning business she dreamed of opening. He was going to come home, and we were going to build something together, told one evening as they watched Sophia chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. He had big plans, always talking about how we would expand, maybe have several teams, hire other military wives who needed flexible work. "What happened to those plans?" asked gently. Smiled sadly. "They're still there, just different now, slower. I'm taking business classes online when Sophia is asleep, helps with the startup costs from his savings. Roberto would have liked that his father and I are partners now, even if he can't be part of it." Was struck by resilience, her ability to adapt her dreams without abandoning them entirely. In his world, when plans failed, people started over completely or gave up. Was finding a way to honor her husband's memory while building something new. "How can I help?" The words came out before could stop them. "Look surprised, help. With your business, I know about starting companies, about financing, marketing, operations." Felt his excitement building as he spoke. "You shouldn't have to do this alone." "Mister, that's very kind, but I couldn't accept charity." "Not charity," said quickly. "Investment, partnership. You have the vision and the work ethic. I have the capital and business experience. We could create something significant together." Exchanged a look with, who had been listening while he watered the late-blooming roses. "We would need to think about it," she said carefully. "Of course, take your time. I just wanted you to know the offer is there." That night found himself researching the cleaning service industry, studying market analyses and franchise models with the same intensity he had once reserved for hostile takeovers. For the first time in years, he was excited about a business opportunity that was not about maximizing his own wealth, but about helping someone else achieve their dreams. The next Saturday morning, he was awakened again by voices in the garden, but this time they were louder, more animated. Looking out his window, he saw Sophia running between the flower beds while and worked nearby. The child's laughter carried on the morning air, pure and joyful. Dressed quickly and went outside, drawn by the sound of happiness. He found Sophia crouched beside a small pond, watching something intently. "What did you find?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "A frog," she whispered, pointing to a small green shape sitting on a lily pad. "Abuelo says it's a good sign when frogs live in your garden. It means the water is clean and healthy." "What else does it mean?" asked, genuinely curious about this child's expanding encyclopedia of natural wisdom. "It means there are lots of bugs for them to eat, and that means the flowers are healthy too. Everything is connected." Smiled at the simple profundity of her observation. "You're very smart, Sophia." She beamed at the compliment, then seemed to remember something important. "Did you see the butterfly this week, the one with the torn wing?" "Every morning," assured her. "She comes right on time, just like you said." "She's getting ready to fly south for the winter. All the monarchs are. They fly all the way to Mexico, thousands of miles. Can you believe that?" Could hardly believe it. The fragile creature he had been watching each morning was preparing for an epic journey that would take her across continents. The idea that something so delicate could be so determined filled him with unexpected awe. "How do they know where to go?" he asked. "Nobody knows for sure," Sophia said seriously. "Scientists think they use the sun and magnetic fields and landmarks, but I think they just trust themselves to find the way." Trust themselves to find the way. The phrase resonated with as he watched the child continue her frog observation. When had he stopped trusting himself to find his way toward what truly mattered? Approached with a watering can, smiling at the sight of, and Sophia deep in conversation about pond life. "Sophia, don't talk Mister's ear off with your animal facts." "I love her animal facts," said honestly. "She knows more about the natural world than most adults I know." "She gets that from Roberto," said softly. "He was always pointing out birds and insects, teaching her to pay attention to small things." Her voice carried love and loss in equal measure. "Tell me about him," said impulsively. set down the watering can, and sat on a nearby garden bench. Sophia continued her frog watching while the adults talked. He was funny, began. Always making jokes even about serious things. He said laughter was the best weapon against fear. She described a man who had been devoted to his family, who had worked 2 jobs while studying business, who had written letters to every day during his deployment, full of plans for their future together. Roberto had been the kind of person who remembered birthdays, who left encouraging notes in textbooks, who taught Sophia to tie her shoes by making up a song about bunny ears and tree roots. "He sounds wonderful," said quietly. "He was, but he also worried too much about money, about providing for us. That's why he enlisted, for the steady pay and benefits. He thought it was the responsible thing to do. Understood the weight of responsibility, the pressure of providing for others. But Roberto had been motivated by love, while had been driven by something else entirely, something he was only now beginning to recognize as a kind of fear disguised as ambition. He said carefully, "Have you thought more about the business partnership I mentioned?" She nodded, and I talked about it. We're interested, but we want to make sure we're equal partners, not just accepting your charity. What would that look like to you? Took a deep breath, clearly having thought this through carefully. You provide startup capital and business guidance. I provide the labor, the training, the daily operations. We split ownership 50-50, with profits reinvested until the business is stable. Then we take equal salaries plus dividends. Was impressed by her thinking. She had obviously been researching partnership structures and had come up with a fair and intelligent proposal. What about? He would remain head groundskeeper here, but cleaning service would maintain the house, said. It would be our first major contract, a way to prove ourselves before seeking other clients. And Sophia's face softened. She would have a college fund and health insurance, and the knowledge that her mother built something lasting, something she could inherit if she wanted it. Felt his chest tighten again, this time with something that felt suspiciously like pride. Not pride in his own accomplishments, but pride in his vision, her determination to create security for her daughter while honoring her husband's dreams. I think those are excellent terms, he said. When would you like to start? Eyes widened. You mean it? You really want to do this? I really want to do this. I've been thinking about it all week. I've made a lot of money, but I've never helped build something that mattered to people I cared about. This feels important. Sophia looked up from the pond, sensing something significant in the adults' conversation. Are you and Mama going to work together? Yes, we are, said, surprising himself with how natural it sounded. Your Mama is going to start her own cleaning business, and I'm going to help her. Sophia considered this gravely. Will you still watch the butterfly in the mornings? Laughed, delighted by her priorities. Absolutely, that's one of my most important jobs now. As they shook hands on their new partnership, felt something he had not experienced in years. Genuine excitement about the future that had nothing to do with stock prices or profit margins. This was about people, about dreams, about creating something meaningful together. That evening called his parents for the first time in 3 months. When his mother answered the phone, her voice warm with surprise and pleasure, he felt ashamed that such a simple gesture had become so rare. How wonderful to hear from you. Your father is making dumplings. Can you come for dinner? I'd love to, he said, and meant it. 2 hours later, he sat at his parents' small kitchen table, eating handmade dumplings and telling them about Sophia and. His parents listened intently, asking questions about the little girl who loved butterflies and the young woman who was determined to build a business despite her loss. This is good, his father said in accented English, nodding approvingly. Help family, this is what money for. His mother reached across the table and patted his hand. You sound happy, different happy than before. As he drove home that night, realized his mother was right. He did feel different. For years, he had thought happiness came from achieving goals, from accumulating wealth, from controlling outcomes. Now he was discovering that it might actually come from the opposite, from connecting with others, from investing in their dreams, from trusting himself to find a way toward what truly mattered. 3 weeks later, stood in the cottage that had been transformed into the headquarters of Morale's family cleaning services. Had insisted on including his name in the business, honoring both her father-in-law's support and her late husband's family legacy. The cottage's main room now served as an office, with a desk, computer, filing system, and a large wall calendar marked with client appointments and employee schedules. Had thrown herself into the business with an energy that impressed even. Within 2 weeks of their handshake agreement, she had completed her business license paperwork, researched insurance requirements, and developed a comprehensive training program for the team she planned to hire. She had also insisted on starting small, with just 3 employees initially, all military spouses who needed flexible work arrangements. Quality first, expansion second, she had explained, too. Roberto always said that reputation is everything in service businesses. Better to do excellent work for 5 clients than mediocre work for 50. Watched now as conducted her first team meeting with a Navy wife whose husband was deployed overseas, and Jennifer, an Army widow with 2 teenage sons. The 3 women sat around's kitchen table, reviewing checklists and discussing client preferences with the seriousness of military strategists planning a campaign. Mrs. specifically requests that we use only natural cleaning products, was saying. She has severe allergies. Since you've worked with green cleaning before, I'd like you to take the lead on her house. Absolutely, replied. I'll bring my own supplies the first time, make sure we have everything she needs. Was struck by the professionalism had brought to what could have been a casual arrangement. She had created systems, protocols, standards that rivaled anything in his corporate empire. The difference was the warmth underlying the efficiency. The way made each team member feel valued and heard. Sophia sat at a smaller table nearby, doing her homework while the adults worked. She had become an unofficial mascot of the new business, her presence a reminder of why was building something lasting. Occasionally, she would look up from her math problems to contribute a comment that invariably made the adults smile. Mama, Sophia said during a brief pause in the meeting, Mrs. has a butterfly garden. She told me yesterday. She said she plants special flowers that butterflies like. That's wonderful, sweetheart, replied. Maybe you can tell her about our monarch butterfly when you see her next week. Felt a pang of loss at Sophia's casual use of the word, our. The butterfly with the torn wing had disappeared 3 days ago, presumably beginning her migration south. Sophia had been the first to notice her absence, standing by the purple flowers each morning for a week before reluctantly accepting that their daily visitor had moved on. She's flying to Mexico now, Sophia had explained to with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. She'll find a forest where millions of monarchs spend the winter together. It's like a butterfly city. The image of millions of butterflies gathering in distant forests had captured his imagination. He found himself researching monarch migration patterns, learning about the mysterious navigational abilities that guided them across thousands of miles to places they had never seen before. The more he learned, the more awed he became by the complexity and wonder of the natural world Sophia took for granted. Mr. Jennifer's voice brought him back to the present meeting. Was telling us about your butterfly, the one Sophia watches every morning. She's gone now, said. Started her migration south. Sophia taught me to recognize her by the tear in her wing. Smiled, my daughter is the same way with animals. She knows every stray cat in our neighborhood has names for all of them. Children notice things adults miss, added. Sophia sees details I would walk right past. The meeting concluded with assignments for the coming week and plans for their first client evaluations. Had suggested implementing a feedback system from the beginning, borrowing from customer service protocols he had developed in his technology companies. Had adapted his corporate template into something more personal, with handwritten thank you notes and small touches that reflected her understanding of what people really wanted from a cleaning service. After and Jennifer left, helped reorganize the office space while Sophia worked on a science project about animal migration. The domestic scene felt remarkably natural, as if he had been part of this family's routine for years rather than weeks. How do you feel about your first official week? Asked as they straightened files. Terrified and excited, she admitted. I keep thinking Roberto would be amazed by all this. He always believed I could run my own business, but I'm not sure even he imagined it happening this way. What do you mean? Paused, considering her words carefully. He worried about me being alone, about having to raise Sophia by myself. I think he would be relieved to know I have help that Sophia has. Well, that she has more adults in her life who care about her. Felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but this time it was accompanied by warmth. He was becoming part of something larger than business success or financial gain. He was becoming part of a family's story, a child's future, a community of people who looked out for each other. "I care about both of you," he said quietly, "more than I expected to when this started." Sophia looked up from her project. "Mister, do you want to see my migration poster?" Knelt beside her small table, where she had drawn a map of North America with a bright orange line tracing the monarch's journey from Canada to Mexico. Along the route, she had illustrated the different landscapes the butterflies would cross: forests, prairies, mountains, deserts. "This is beautiful, Sophia. You're quite an artist." She beamed at the praise. "I want to visit the butterfly sanctuary in Mexico someday. Mama said maybe when I'm older we can take a trip there." "That sounds like an excellent plan," said. Then, impulsively, he added, "Maybe I could go with you. I've never seen millions of butterflies in one place." Sophia's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? You would want to see the butterfly city?" "I would love to see the butterfly city." Smiled at the exchange, but caught a flicker of concern in her expression. Later, as they walked back to the main house together, she voiced her worry. "I don't want Sophia to get too attached and then be disappointed. Your life is very different from ours. You travel all over the world, you have important business meetings. I don't want her to expect more from you than you can give." Stopped walking and turned to face her. In the weeks since they had become business partners, had remained slightly formal with him, as if she was not quite sure how to navigate their evolving relationship. He understood her caution. She was protecting her daughter from the possibility of loss, having already experienced how quickly someone important could disappear from their lives. He said carefully, "I understand why you're worried, and I want you to know that I take my commitments seriously, especially commitments to people I care about. If I tell Sophia I'll take her to see the butterflies, I mean it." "But what if your feelings change? What if you get bored with playing family with us?" The question stung because it reflected fears had been wrestling with himself. Was this genuine transformation, or was he simply going through a phase? Would the novelty of being needed and appreciated wear off when the demands of his business empire reasserted themselves? "I can't promise my life won't change," he said honestly. "But I can promise that my commitment to you and Sophia won't. This isn't a game for me. This is the most important thing I've ever been part of." They walked the rest of the way in thoughtful silence. At the main house, headed toward the cottage while climbed the steps to his front door. Before going inside, he turned back. "Thank you for trusting me with this. With your business with Sophia's dreams, I know it's not easy." She smiled, the first completely relaxed smile he had seen from her. "Thank you for seeing us as more than just people who work for you. That means more than you know." Inside the house, Mrs. was preparing dinner, humming quietly to herself as she moved around the kitchen. Had learned that she hummed when she was particularly content, usually when she was cooking for her family or preparing food that reminded her of her childhood in El Salvador. "Good evening, Mrs. What smells so wonderful?" She replied, "Mentioned that Sophia has never tried them, so I thought I might make extra and take some to the cottage." Was touched by this gesture of inclusion. Mrs. had taken and Sophia under her wing with the same quiet efficiency she brought to managing his household. "That's very thoughtful. Do you think you could teach me to make them?" Mrs. looked genuinely shocked. "You want to learn to cook?" "I want to learn to do useful things," said. "Things that matter to people I care about." For the next hour, Mrs. taught how to mix masa with warm water, how to form perfect circles of dough, how to fill them with cheese and beans without overstuffing. His first attempts were lopsided and fell apart in the pan, but Mrs. was patient, guiding his hands and adjusting his technique. "Cooking is like business," she observed as finally produced a recognizable. "You need good ingredients, careful preparation, and practice, but most important, you need to cook with love." As they worked together, found himself thinking about the different types of value he had spent his life pursuing. He had mastered the creation of financial value, the multiplication of capital, the optimization of returns. But he had never learned to create the kind of value that Mrs. made every day: nourishment, comfort, the simple pleasure of food prepared with care. When they were ready, they walked to the cottage together, carrying plates and a jar of the tangy cabbage slaw that traditionally accompanied the dish. And Sophia welcomed them warmly, and soon all four were sitting around the small kitchen table, sharing a meal that none of them had planned but all of them needed. Sophia tried her first cautiously, then her eyes lit up with delight. "It's like a cheese sandwich but better." Mrs. laughed, pleased by the child's enthusiasm. In El Salvador, families make these together on Sundays. Everyone has a job, even the little children. Could you teach me how to make them? Sophia asked. I could help feed people too. Watched this exchange with growing understanding. Food was not just sustenance in these women's worlds. It was connection, tradition, love made tangible. Sophia's eagerness to learn was about more than cooking skills. She was learning how to care for others, how to create moments of joy and comfort. As the evening wound down and they prepared to return to the main house pulled aside. Thank you for tonight, for learning to make, for eating dinner with us. Sophia will remember this. So will I, said truthfully. Walking back through the garden with Mrs. felt the deep satisfaction that comes from time well spent. He had learned a new skill, shared a meal with people who mattered to him, and witnessed Sophia's delight in discovering new flavors. None of these experiences would show up on a balance sheet or quarterly report, but they felt more valuable than any financial gain he had achieved. As he prepared for bed that night, stood once more at his bedroom window, looking out at the garden where a family had built their life on his property. The cottage glowed with warm light, and he could see helping Sophia with her bedtime routine. Sat on the small porch, probably reviewing plans for the N6 months later, stood in his office conference room, but instead of facing investors or board members, he was presenting to a group of business students from the University of Washington. Sat at his side, confidently fielding questions about cash flow projections and employee retention strategies for Morale's family cleaning services, which now employed 12 people and had a waiting list of potential clients. The key to our success, was explaining to a young woman who had asked about scaling the business, isn't just about growing bigger. It's about maintaining the personal touch that makes us different from corporate cleaning companies. Every employee is trained not just to clean efficiently, but to notice details that matter to homeowners. When a family is preparing for a special event, when someone is recovering from illness, when a house needs extra care during stressful times. Watched with pride as she described their unique approach. She had transformed her initial vision into something even more meaningful than either of them had originally imagined. The business was profitable and growing steadily, but more importantly, it had become a model for how military spouses could create sustainable careers despite frequent relocations and deployment separations. Mister, a student asked, what made you want to invest in a small service business when your portfolio focuses primarily on technology and international markets? Considered his answer carefully. 6 months ago, he would have talked about diversification strategies or untapped market opportunities. Now, his reasons were both simpler and more complex. I learned that the most valuable investments aren't always about maximizing returns, he said. Sometimes they're about maximizing human potential. Had a vision and the skills to execute it, but she needed capital and business guidance. I had capital and business experience, but I needed to remember what it felt like to build something meaningful with people I cared about. After the students left and walked through the executive floors of Tower, discussing plans for opening a second location. As they passed the offices where his employees worked, noticed things he had never seen before. Family photos on desks, birthday decorations in cubicles, the easy camaraderie between colleagues who had found ways to connect beyond their job responsibilities. How do you do it? Asked as they waited for the elevator. Do what? Manage all this, she gestured around them, and still have time for Sophia's science fair projects and butterfly watching and cooking lessons with Mrs. Smiled, remembering how impossible that balance had seemed just months earlier. I learned to delegate more and control less, and I learned the difference between being busy and being productive. Most of the things I thought required my personal attention actually didn't. The elevator arrived, and as they descended toward the parking garage, reflected on how much had changed since that night when he had first noticed whispers in his garden. His business success was the most visible transformation, but it was not the most important one. The most important change was Sophia. The shy, quiet child who had whispered about butterflies had blossomed into a confident young scientist with opinions about everything from climate change to space exploration. She still loved butterflies, but her interests had expanded to include marine biology, astronomy, and renewable energy. Had introduced her to colleagues who were working on environmental technologies, and she had peppered them with questions that impressed even seasoned researchers. Last month, Sophia had won first place in her school's science fair with a project about pollinator gardens. She had designed a comprehensive plan for creating butterfly and bee habitats in urban environments, complete with plant selection guides, maintenance schedules, and educational components for community involvement. The judges had been amazed by the sophistication of her research and the passion behind her presentation. Had been in the audience that day, watching as Sophia explained her project to a group of adults who hung on her every word. When she received her blue ribbon, her first instinct had been to look for him in the crowd. Their eyes met across the gymnasium, and her smile had been worth more than any business triumph he had ever achieved. "Did I tell you that Sophia wants to apply for the summer science program at the Marine Research Center?" asked as they reached car. "The one for high school students, but she's only 7. Laughed, "I know it's early, but she's already planning. She wants to study how marine pollution affects butterfly migration patterns. Apparently, some butterflies follow coastlines during their journeys, and ocean health impacts the flowers they depend on for food." Shook his head in amazement. Sophia's ability to see connections between seemingly unrelated environmental systems continued to astonish him. "What did you tell her?" "That she has plenty of time to develop her ideas, but that it's wonderful she's thinking ahead. I also told her that any research program would be lucky to have her someday." As drove home that evening, he thought about the chain of events that had brought them all together. If he had not stayed late that October night, if he had not noticed the movement in his garden, if he had not been curious enough to investigate the whispers below his window, none of this would have happened. Would still be struggling to build her business alone. Sophia would still be dreaming about butterfly sanctuaries without anyone to help make those dreams accessible. And would still be rich, successful, and completely empty. At home, he found Sophia and Mrs. in the kitchen, preparing dinner together while worked in the herb garden visible through the window. Sophia was carefully measuring ingredients for a recipe they had found in one of Scott's cookbook collection, while Mrs. provided patient guidance and encouragement. Sophia called when she saw him. "We're making butterfly pasta. It's not made from butterflies," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "The pasta is shaped like butterflies. Mrs. found it at the market." "It smells wonderful," said, settling into a chair at the kitchen island where he could watch them work. This had become his favorite time of day. The gentle chaos of meal preparation, the easy conversation between Sophia and Mrs., the sense of being part of something larger than himself. "Mama said you might take me to the library tomorrow," Sophia said as she stirred a pot of sauce. "I want to find books about marine butterflies." "Marine butterflies. Butterflies that live near the ocean. I'm doing a research project about how they're different from land butterflies." Sophia's pronunciation of research project made smile. She had absorbed academic vocabulary from their conversations with surprising speed. "I'd be happy to take you to the library," said, "but I have one condition." Sophia looked at him seriously. "What condition?" "You have to help me find a book too. Something about cooking or gardening or taking care of butterflies. I'm still learning about useful things." Sophia giggled. "You're very good at useful things now. You can make and you know how to plant bulbs and you remember to put water in the butterfly feeders." Felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. In Sophia's world, these simple skills were more impressive than his ability to manage billion-dollar investments or negotiate international contracts. Her perspective had taught him to value competence that served others rather than competence that served only himself. Arrived just as they were setting the table, bringing with her news from the business and updates on their employees. The cleaning service had become more than a source of income. It had become a community. Regularly organized training sessions that served as informal support groups for military spouses, and several clients had become friends who invited their cleaners to family celebrations and holiday gatherings. "His husband comes home next month," announced as they sat down to dinner. "She's so nervous about readjusting to having him home, but excited too. She wants to throw him a welcome party, and Mrs. offered to host it at her house." Smiled at this news. Mrs., the client with the butterfly garden that Sophia admired, had become one of strongest supporters, frequently recommending the cleaning service to her friends and neighbors. The relationship between client and service provider had evolved into genuine friendship, another example of how this approach created connections rather than just transactions. After dinner, while Mrs. and cleaned the kitchen, and Sophia worked on her marine butterfly research at the dining room table. She had filled a notebook with questions and observations, her childish handwriting recording insights that would not have been out of place in a graduate-level environmental science course. She said, looking up from a book about coastal ecosystems, "Do you think butterflies know how important they are?" "What do you mean?" "Like, do they know that without them, lots of plants wouldn't have bobbies? Do they know that people like us study them to learn about the environment?" Considered her question seriously. "I don't think they think about it the way we do, but maybe they know in a different way. Maybe they just know they belong to something bigger than themselves." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Like how you belong to our family now, even though you didn't start out with us." The simplicity of her statement took breath away. Belonging. That was what he had been searching for without realizing it. Not more money or more success or more control, but the knowledge that he was part of something meaningful, that his life intersected with other lives in ways that mattered. "Yes," he said quietly, "exactly like that." Later that evening, after Sophia had been tucked into bed and had returned to the cottage, sat on his balcony overlooking the garden. Spring was well advanced now, and the flower beds were bursting with color and life. The butterfly feeders he and Sophia had installed were attracting a steady stream of visitors, each species with its own schedule and preferences. A year ago, this garden had been beautiful but sterile, maintained by invisible hands for his aesthetic pleasure alone. Now it was a living laboratory where a curious child conducted daily observations, a source of ingredients for family meals, and a gathering place where 3 generations worked together to create something sustainable and beautiful. His phone buzzed with the familiar notifications of international markets opening, urgent emails requiring his attention, board decisions that could not wait until morning. But for the first time since he had started building his empire, these demands felt manageable rather than overwhelming. He had learned to distinguish between what required his immediate attention and what simply wanted it. He would check his emails and handle the truly urgent matters, but first he would sit here a little longer, watching the garden settle into evening quiet. Somewhere in Mexico, in forests he had never seen, millions of monarch butterflies were beginning to stir with the approach of spring, preparing for the journey that would bring some of them back to this very garden. The butterfly with the torn wing would not be among them. Her migration had been a one-way journey. But her descendants might return, carrying genetic memories of purple flowers and patient observers. Tomorrow would take Sophia to the library as promised. He would help her find books about marine butterflies and would select something for himself about sustainable gardening or perhaps butterfly conservation. They would spend the morning learning together, and in the afternoon, he would attend a board meeting where he would make decisions affecting thousands of employees and millions of dollars. Both activities were important, but only one felt essential. Had learned the difference between success that isolated and success that connected. He had discovered what his mother had tried to tell him years ago, that a lonely heart was indeed a heavy burden, but a heart connected to others could bear any weight. As the stars appeared over sound and the lights in the cottage finally went out, made a quiet promise to the night air, to the sleeping garden, to the family who had taught him how to belong. He would never again mistake wealth for richness, achievement for fulfillment, or control for security. The whispers he had heard below his window that October night had not been a disturbance. They had been an invitation to join the ongoing conversation of life, love, and hope that had been taking place all around him, waiting only for him to listen, to learn, and to find his place in the beautiful complexity of human connection. In the cottage below, Sophia dreamed of underwater butterflies dancing through coral reefs, while her mother planned tomorrow's client visits and her grandfather prepared for another day of coaxing beauty from the earth. And in the main house, a billionaire fell asleep not to the silence of isolation, but to the gentle sounds of a world he had finally learned to call home-ex day's work. Tomorrow, realized, he would get up and go to his office and make decisions worth millions of dollars. But tonight, he had learned to make and share dinner with a 6-year-old who could map butterfly migration patterns from memory. For the first time in his adult life, he knew with certainty which of these accomplishments mattered more. The butterfly with the torn wing would soon begin her impossible journey south, guided by instincts older than human civilization. Was beginning his own journey, one that would take him away from the isolation of success toward something he had never thought to value. The simple joy of belonging to something larger than himself, firing decisions worth millions of dollars. but instead of immediately checking them, walked to the window and looked out at his garden, where a man and his family were patiently planting hope for a spring that was still months away. Do with stock prices or quarterly reports, but everything to do with hope.